Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Although it's 12:35 where you are. All right. So we haven't spoken since we met last Wednesday, and I had some homework, I think. And there was another topic I wanted to bring up too. But Rochelle, tell me what my homework was. Let's see if I remembered it correctly.
You was asking the wrong person to remember anything that was last week. I don't even remember what I told you.
The project manager?
I don't know. Do you know how many other projects has been in front of my face? I don't know.
Okay. She said, enable the people to report their current status. So my homework was to come back and talk about DC, my trip to DC. Does that ring a bell?
Yes. And,
Okay.
and why were you going to talk about your trip to DC?
You said there's probably some good material there, I think.
Okay, let's talk.
So let's talk about the National Guard for a second, because that's something that I could easily chime in on because I was in DC in May, where the National Guard had not been deployed to provide peace and protection and order to the citizens of Washington, D.C., because uh, the DC police system was apparently not doing that effectively, and the crime was really rampant. And in between that and going to England, coming back, I had a trip planned, leaving last Thursday and returning home last night or night before last. And there was a National Guard presence there, obviously. Is this something you're familiar with, Rochelle? This
Yes.
topic? Yeah. So my cousins live down near the Navy Yard, which is right on the off the Anacostia River. And there's definitely a National Guard presence. And there are groups of them stationed in different places throughout the city. And they come in on these big coach buses and they're just stationed throughout the city in groups of, five. I saw 10, saw military trucks down at the Navy yards as a general presence as well. So before I go into that, Rochelle, like how does that strike you? And you live in Charlotte, and obviously good amount of crime rate there as well, and different levels of police confidence. But how does that strike you? What would that be like for you? You think living in Charlotte?
Well, for me, I think it's very unfortunate that the citizens have to go through this. And I think there's a different way that it could be handled. And the way that it's been handled now is not very much constitutional or fair to the citizens who have been living there as well. And I think it would make more of a difference if the truth was being told and the facts were actually facts and not made up.
Yeah, and that's that perspective is one of the reasons why I think we've stayed and remained friends, is because you always give me perspectives that luckily I'm at a point in time in my life where I can listen and absorb and not react uh, and think, well, that's a dumb way of thinking. But my response to that would be, is it is it to overlord or overwatch the citizens in terms of what they do or don't do, or is it to watch the citizens and uh, or let's say monitor the areas where the citizens frequent in order to provide them with an extra layer of protection that they wouldn't have before?
Neither. Neither. I think this is a beginning of a war that's going to start in the United States.
So that brings up another interesting point, and and that that I love that too, because that just jumps to the next more interesting point versus, bantering back and forth on something that, there's no point in agreeing or disagreeing on. It just is a matter of how you view things versus uh, how I may argue things. Because I have views, but I don't have a particular stance on this one. I'm just going based on my observations, which is a lot about what our conversations end up being. And then we arrive at some point where it's like, oops. But that's interesting because I was actually born very close to Washington, D.C., in Alexandria, Virginia in 1972. And so I feel that this is something that I can honestly speak to. I lived there until I was 23 and I moved to Dallas. And I can't speak to Chicago, but I believe it's very similar. And I can't speak to Baltimore, which is always the next one up for discussion about bringing in this type of assistance. I can speak to this on Washington, D.C. There are generational issues that have been compounded. This is not a new issue for Washington, D.C. It has more deep impact because there are so many unresolved issues from previous generations in terms of how we conduct ourselves, in an environment that, how do I put this? So I don't shock people on the second episode, but
Just say
we have generational issues that start at home due to the cultures that we're raised in that are unresolved. And the reason why I agree with your last statement that there's a war that's about to happen within our own streets and neighborhoods, is that we're all fighting for this solution, and we're literally fighting for a solution. And the only thing that could really propel us into any hope of resolution and smoothing out our culture and being a happier place to live and not so angry is to start back to basics and start. I'd also just recently traveled out of the country to England. It is not unusual to go to Europe. I've never been well, I've been to India, but it's not unusual to go to Europe and to Milan or England and go into a shopping area and there are armed military people there. So it's shocking to me in a way that Americans, such as yourself, believe that it's more of an oversight to the people themselves versus a protective measure. And it's one of those things that, one, we have to remember that's the city that Trump lives in. That's like you living in Charlotte. It's like me living in Plano. Where does he have the most measure of impact in order to change a problem that he sees is in his own neighborhood? And so he leveraged a law that was already existing that had never been used, that had always been there, where he could exercise this particular power in his neighborhood when things weren't going so well. What I view that as saying is saying, okay, we're gonna kind of go back to basics, and we're not going to focus on this area or this area of town or this area of town, but we're going to focus on the areas of town that are feeling the most um, uh, violence and lots of carjackings and mobs of young people that are in places that they really shouldn't be. That's not their neighborhood,
Who
and
said
they're not
that?
there.
Who said that? Who said that was those areas? Like he said that those were the areas that was mostly high and whatever, but who I don't trust anything that comes out that man's mouth.
Yeah. No, what I was doing more of a comparison versus saying, okay, well, I'm going to deploy. It's not like he deployed uh,
In a
5
suburban area.
million to cover the streets of DC. They're focused in areas where the most protection is needed for, you know, people that are out in public places that have historical meaning to our country, such as the parks and the Navy Yards, where there's the soccer team and the baseball team. And there are normally in those neighborhoods, there are, is primarily residential besides some areas of government buildings like the Department of Transportation and areas like that. So it's not just putting National Guard everywhere or in specific socioeconomical areas. They are placed in areas where there is a mix of the people that live there and a mix of the people who are visiting there to experience our country's history. Um, and where the most safety is needed, not where the most use of arms is needed. And so that's kind of my
Okay,
two
so
cents
what
on
does
it.
safety look like? Because you said use of arms and safety. So what does safety look like?
So it's a presence of being. It's merely just a presence of being. From my viewpoint, there's an intense amount of impulsivity going on in the culture. So people who were already upset and mad or madder, peace, which makes you more impulsive. And so for me, that presence of mind there gives someone the pause of, should I carjack this car or should I accost this woman or man or child? Should I steal this? Right? It's for me, it's giving that padding, it's giving that person a moment to say, is this the kind of day that I want to have? And is this the kind of day I want this person to have? And is it worth my effort? Because right now doesn't seem to be any checks and balances there to go, is this a decision I want to make today? And they are providing that layer of protection.
And we're talking about grown folks making these decisions. All right. Okay. Where are we going with this?
Yeah, we'll it was just something that, I felt like I wanted to talk about because one, I grew up in that area, so it was different for me to see that presence. And the thing I'll close on is that there's a wide swath of opinions in the DC area about that situation. And anything from they've asked them for directions and people are mad because they don't know how to tell them to get somewhere. And it's really not what they're there to do. Um, to also being teased and bullied and I saw someone on a jog just running by a group of guardsmen and women uh, and just said, oh, your bus is down there waiting for you, just it's kind of one of those old adages, like if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. These are young people, they're told by their boss to do a job and and that's what they're there to do. So yeah, that's that topic. Other than that, seamless trip. My two cousins have four children under the age of four. The oldest three are
Yeah, how many?
girls. They have so my one cousin has a little girl and a little boy that are 2 and 9 months, and her sister has two. One is 4, and the other one is 2. So we all got together and took the kids throughout neighborhoods in DC. But the youngest one's a boy, and he's my partner in crime. So I just love little baby boys. So it was nice to have that family bond there. I also drove out and saw my new place in Delaware. That was that was good. I got to see what city I'm about to wreak havoc on. I don't know if that was so apparent in our first discussion, but I have officially decided to put my house on the market and move myself to Delaware. So yesterday I broke that news to my ex. Um, and as usual, he was a loser.
Mm.
No surprise there. But yeah, so that's kind of my news. what anything you want to talk about, Rochelle, that would interest our.
Well, I know you said you wanted to talk about the job market. So what do you want to discuss around that? Because I know, um, did we tell them how we got into the job market? I can't remember if we discussed that.
We
Uh,
talked about, meeting where we met, and we
No, no,
didn't
no.
really
How did
talk
we get to being job seekers in the
job
market?
seekers, right? So Rochelle was under a contract that ended with the firm that we were previously employed with. And then what was it about? Was it quite a month when I resigned? Um,
I was trying to
oh,
talk
don't
you out of
ask
it.
me. So I resigned in May. I believe your contract was up at the end of March, something like that.
April.
So I voluntarily resigned, and so that's how Rochelle and I ended up on the job market, and that was something that I was going to talk about. That I've been on the job market, well, between the two of us, it's roughly around 5 months,
Yep.
and I am 53, and I've been in IT for 30 years. I have never had trouble finding work. You know, I have a little bit more experience than Rochelle. In terms of just because of our age differences.
A
I
whole
have
lot.
never, huh?
A whole lot.
A whole lot. Oh, okay, that means she's very young, which she is.
Pretty much.
So I have never experienced a job market like this one. And again, it's like our previous conversation. There are unresolved generation issues that are coming into play in this job market, and there really are. And so I wanted to talk about. I'm interested, Rochelle. You're staying very close to the hot pavement, a little bit more closer than I am because I've been on my world tour, as you call it. But I'm sitting in my seat now, and I'm here for a while, so I'm about to get my feet hot under the pavement as well. But you're closer, I think, than me to the actual pulse of what's going on in the job market. And I'll just say this and I'll pass it to you. I have not, since May 22nd, I have not had one phone interview that I would say was a true introduction to the job process. So I wouldn't even call it a phone interview because that implies, it was going to lead to something after that. So I don't have anything to draw from since May other than nothing. So I want to pass it to you and see what do you want to say on the subject about where we are, and then maybe we can close up with what can we do to help people and help ourselves.
So I watched a reel this morning on LinkedIn because that's where I spend majority of my time these days. And the reel was talking about the September surge. Because have you heard of the September surge?
Mm-mm. No.
Okay, so I first heard of the September surge maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. It's basically in September where a lot of these companies and organizations beef up their hiring. Like you see a surge in hiring for positions. So there's been talks about, does the September surge still exist with today's job market? But the reel that I was watching, the guy was basically saying there's no such thing as September surge. And this I don't know because I never been a hiring manager. Maybe you can speak to this within, your experience. But he was saying that a lot of times companies are much slower in the springtime and summertime. And then going into September is when they start putting more jobs out. So it's not really a surge. It's just basically how the flow of things going from quarter to quarter.
Yeah, so I think there is some truth to that, and I can actually prove you. Then it was more coincidental, not to prove her wrong, and that's sort of what the tongue in cheek about prove me wrong is, because usually I have time on something has happened to me in my past that recent that I can chime in on. I just got an email today. I don't know if you remember, but I have a consulting company that I've worked with for many years in Dallas, and they hosted a workshop for the firm that we last worked in, and they had offered me a free class in their training. And I had expressed to them just yesterday that, this is a training I would like to sign up on. Thank you, thank you, thank you. By the way, here's my resume. I am in dire straits, like financially. I've never been in dire straits since I got divorced, and it's really really bad. And one of the things they said was, we expect the market to unplug now that schools started, and not only that, I mean, schools are out. I think they've also just started in England as well, a little bit behind us. So, and this is someone that's been a recruiter for that consulting firm for as long as I've known them, which is probably close to 20 years. The housing market isn't all too different from that. But I also think that there are other things that are factoring into this. People are not leaving jobs. So the number of open jobs is actually lower, I read this morning, than pre-COVID. So during COVID, people were like, F you, I don't need this. I'm getting more assistance. I'm getting this, I'm getting that. And no one else cares, and neither do I. Now, 70% of the people who even consider leaving are staying. And for people like me and you, that's bad. Because when you don't have a situation like we did a year or two ago, where we were just talking about mass layoffs left and right, right?
Well, they're still laying off.
But it's not as hotter of a topic, or at least I'm not hearing about it as more. So it felt like there for a stretch, like there was nothing but like these big firms, Microsoft and Google, and it was like one after the other in the press about mass layoffs. But the hiring is slowing. I think that the job market itself, the number of people that want to be employed, and I say want, so the pool of people that are putting themselves out there, numerically, I don't think has changed very much. But the amount of jobs, they may be creating them. But I think for folks like me and you that are in that mid experience to high experience range, those people are not leaving their companies. They're staying. And so I believe if you have jobs, they're entry level. We talked about skill. You and I sent a few messages earlier today about skills first hiring. There are also folks that are doing, early applications, or people who are entering the market even earlier than college graduation, which is also adding more people to the competition. But people with our experience levels, this is again my opinion, there's not as many jobs. So if you took the whole sector of all the jobs that are available and you boiled that down into all the jobs that you and I would want to go get, which are in similar industries, in similar organizations with similar, words. It's not like I'm in banking and, you're in landscape supply, like we do similar things. But if you took everybody from age 36 to 50 that have our experience that ranges, and you go statistically look at the number of jobs there that are available, I'm guessing there aren't that many. And so we have the situation also compounding that there's a lot of fake jobs out there. I read today that 1 in 5 jobs are ghost. They're ghost jobs. It's worse than Tinder.
Yeah. And I've been on the market pretty much for about a year, I would say.
That's right, because you knew your contract was ending.
Yeah, and then it ended up getting extended. So I've been on the market for about a year now. Yeah, that is absolutely, I can vouch for that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we agreed. So I think, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, it's 12 o'clock. Maybe that's a good place to end. I love this episode. Like, are we viral yet? Because I'm hoping this is going to be the one.
It's like to pay my mortgage.
And I've figured out how the camera didn't switch. Gabe, my friend Gabe, which I'm going to try to have him on next time. So Gabe is my little procrastinator friend. He's starting, and now I just find focus time. So anyway, go to our Facebook page and Gabe, I'll get it right, Gabe. We'll have Gabe on. We'll talk about this procrastination thing, but I'm in such a good headspace since we did our first episode, and I feel really, really good about this one.
Hey,
And
you
if
didn't
we
think the
get
first episode was good enough?
no, I think no, but I like to see improve. I was very nervous. Let me put it that way. I was very
Oh,
nervous. You were in
okay.
bed. You were in a blanket. I don't know what kind of day you were.
I was tired. That
You
weekend
was
wore me.
tired. So let's go. Let's end this. Thank you, Rochelle. Have a beautiful day. I'm sure I will talk to you offline and because we're gonna probably do another episode just for our LinkedIn friends and let's get them wrapped into this subject. I'll change my background. Love you.
See
Be
you later.
nice to one another. Bye.
Yes.